Rapture. The keenest minds in the world, united under the ocean, yet somehow expected to subscribe to the same model of self-interest. Ryan could be staggeringly naive.
Every great villain believes that in some capacity, through their actions, they are building a better future. The tyrant calls it order, the revolutionary calls it justice, the zealot calls it salvation. Our own history is filled with those who committed horrible atrocities not because they saw themselves as evil, but because they were so deeply convinced that the world would be improved once everyone else understood their vision. And here, in the year 1968, on the very floor of the Atlantic Ocean, we find a video game villain that embodies all that dangerous certainty more completely than most others. A fascinating and often overlooked antagonist from one of the most routinely disrespected video games of all time. A woman who doesn't seek wealth, glory, or personal power, but something far more unsettling. A genetically perfect utopia where suffering, selfishness, and conflict would disappear forever, but humanity itself would need to be reshaped in order to achieve it. Dr. Sofia Lamb, resident psychiatrist of Rapture. The type of evil that doesn't rely on brute strength nor charisma, but a careful clinical hand, an exacting mind, and a simple plea to those looking to be a part of something greater than themselves. The matriarch of a strange pseudo-religious cult that has survived the chaos of an explosive civil war, quietly weaving a web of influence and control in this subaquatic nightmare until she can seize all of its potential just for herself. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to the Villainpedia, a video series where we take these long looks at the most fascinatingly evil characters video games have to offer and try to figure out what makes them special or memorable. I am Ghost, your host as always, and really quick, I do want to say thank you so much to all of my incredible patrons for supporting this channel away from YouTube. You guys help me out so much more than you will ever understand. And now, let's waste no more time and begin. When you take a step back and look at the entire epic trilogy that is the Bioshock franchise, with each title being so different from the previous one, man, you have quite a deep exploration of various big-time isms. Objectivism, capitalism, libertarianism, exceptionalism, fundamentalism, nationalism. It can definitely be a little bit philosophically overwhelming, especially if today we're going to jump right into the second game, the middle one of the franchise, to try to dissect its villain and all of her unique ideals without full and proper context. So you know what? I think just to start here, we should build a super solid factual foundation of who this Sofia woman is in-universe, where she came from, what she thinks of the world, and of course, how she arrived in Rapture. So Dr. Sofia Lamb was born sometime in the early 20th century in an unknown part of the United Kingdom, but most likely the southeast of Britain given her specific accent. And we know from the official Bioshock 2 strategy guide, as well as some in-game hints, that Sofia was raised almost entirely by her father, who made a living as a skilled and respected physician in the family's community. But the senior Lamb was guided both professionally and personally by the very utilitarian ideals of serving a greater good through the practice of medicine, by not ever thinking of himself or even an individual patient, but the well-being of his town at large, his country, and ultimately the world. This is something that he referred to as the triage imperative. And really, this is by no stretch a radical viewpoint to have as a doctor. It could even be argued that utilitarianism should be a pillar of modern medicine, especially when you're talking about things like public health and well-being. But from a very, very young age, Sofia strongly identified with this outlook as well, and as she grew into a young adult, sought to give herself to the service of the greater good just like her father, eventually going on to study psychiatry at the University of Oxford. Now, unfortunately, we don't really know anything else about Lamb's formative years or anything else about her father. And while in school, she seems to have grown even more devoted to this noble concept of the collective human experience, as just after graduating in the mid-1940s, Lamb decided to fly halfway around the world to Hiroshima, Japan of all places, contributing first-hand humanitarian aid that was necessary after the United States dropped a nuclear bomb on the city, ending World War II. And seeing that level of suffering on the ground there, the apocalyptic scenes of annihilation and pain, this experience didn't just radicalize Lamb. It made her completely lose hope in the world as it was. And what was especially disturbing to her was how the most powerful nation in the world's justification for doing something so destructive was in the very same vein as her and her father's personal beliefs. That the president of that nation could say the nukes had to be dropped to protect a so-called greater good. That the deaths of upwards of 166,000 people was actually an act of altruism. And after losing many of the patients and friends that she made in Japan due to injury or illness, we can safely assume that she went public with this scathing opinion of the US government in some capacity, gaining some notoriety for it. Because just a handful of years later, something happened that would irreversibly change Sofia's life. She received in the mail an invitation, a personal invitation from a man named Andrew Ryan. In late 1951, Mr. Ryan, a high-profile American business tycoon, completed what was classified as the North Atlantic Project, a massive secretive undersea colony located somewhere between Iceland and Greenland that had been under construction for nearly 6 years. Officially, this place was called the City of Rapture, and it was a tremendous feat of human ingenuity, a marvel that was constructed to be an individualist haven, attracting only the brightest minds from all around the world to come live, work, and create without any moral censorship or government oversight. To its creator, Rapture was an attempt at utopia. But of all people, Sofia Lamb was invited to such a place for really one reason and one reason only. Ryan was in pretty desperate need of help.
I'm told that the people grow tense and isolated in the absence of the sun. Now they clamor for a psychiatrist. Do they miss the state censor, I wonder? Wartime seizure of private assets? Or the checkup police vanishing them in the night? Regardless, this Lamb woman is said to be the foremost practitioner in her field. Fine. If she can quiet the rattling of the great chain's weakest links, I will leave her to it.
And it is very interesting to me how in his own villainous backstory, the bombs being dropped on Japan were also the breaking point for Ryan, though of course for extremely different philosophical reasons. By the way, if you want a more detailed look at him and the entire construction of Rapture, the events of Bioshock 1, please go check out his Villainpedia entry from 4 or 5 years ago. I'll link it down below. But with such a unique opportunity and the disillusionment she felt with modern society, Dr. Lamb wasted zero time in accepting Ryan's offer and immediately relocating to the metropolis under the sea. I believe that she saw this as a chance to not only continue her psychiatry work in a really interesting place, but enter this so-called utopia, hoping to enrich it a little bit with her own fierce beliefs. Because let's face it, every single person who arrived through the front doors of Rapture had their own idea of what was going to make it great. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have been watching my channel with some regularity over the last few years, or if you've enjoyed my video game music channel called Ghost Chill at some point, you may know that my older brother is an extremely talented pixel artist. Well, for the last few years now, he has been working day in, day out super hard as the artistic lead on a fantastic indie game called Tomb Guard. And it really is my greatest joy to say that this is the sponsor of today's video. Tomb Guard is a real-time party tactics game with pause mechanics starring your very own ragtag group of skeleton heroes as they defend their homeland from invading fiends. And it's really one of those old-school challenging type of games where you're gonna get whooped on and whooped on bad, but over time amass experience and improvements to your little dudes as you slowly blaze a path across this strange dark land. And listen man, I have played a ton of Tomb Guard over the years as it's been developing, and you can take my word when I say it is genuinely great. I think if you like roguelites, if you like dungeon crawling, and that type of unforgiving strategy gameplay, Tomb Guard is right up your alley. And right now, all I'm asking you guys to do is hit that Steam store link down below and wishlist the game. That is it. They're aiming to have a fully playable demo released this September, and I want this entire community to help me in supporting all of my big brother's blood, sweat, and tears that he's put into this project. So again, go wishlist the game. It costs you literally nothing to do so. Thank you so much Tomb Guard for sponsoring, and now, back to the action. Well, from the moment Sofia Lamb arrived in Rapture, she didn't exactly have the easiest time fitting in with those in power. And I mean, when you look at Andrew Ryan, his beliefs, his extreme disdain for things like the church, taxes, social welfare, It is incredibly strange, I would say humorous even, that he would willingly invite someone advocating for togetherness and the greater good down here. But it seems Sofia was not intimidated by her peers, and perhaps even had a bit of sinister energy in coming to this place at all.
In ethical psychiatry, we must account for the role of evolution. Depression, fits of panic, sexual pathos, all responses to ancient selection pressure. The irony is that this theory is why Ryan's people invited me here. They mistake my study of natural law for the worship of competition. One must know the beast before it can be slain.
And once she was established as the psychiatrist in town, Lamb began to very slowly but surely, like a creeping flame, spread her way of thinking through the vulnerable practice of private therapy. Because listen, agree with his philosophies or not, Andrew Ryan's leadership down here led to many things, and not all of them were very good. For instance, a dramatic and widening gap of inequality throughout the 1950s had large sections of the people here kind of scratching their heads and wondering when their utopian dream was supposed to start. There were also many that Ryan had personal beef with or felt threatened by for whatever reason, and thus were quietly blackballed by Rapture's elite. So there were plenty of minds down here open to new ideas. But honestly, not much is said in the lore about the details of Lamb's ascent. But it does seem that over a very short period of time, she grew to be a massively influential voice, much more than just a therapist. She wrote a book called Unity and Metamorphosis, chock full of ideas that might be categorized as Marxist, which quickly made its way around. She openly challenged Ryan's concept of the great chain of industry, one of the crown jewels of his hyper-competitive market system. She created a massive commune of artists, musicians, and poets on her personal property and called it Dionysus Park, naming it after the ancient Greek god of wine, insanity, and religious fervor.
Lamb is becoming a problem. The woman is a damned collectivist here in Rapture. How could the council fail to see it? Worse, to hide her intent, she gulls these patients of hers into a religious frenzy. A new Kremlin will rise and swallow the council house before they realize they've been had. I will not have my city swindled by the parasite, whatever its guise.
And to Andrew Ryan's credit, he let this happen for a long time. I mean, if he was going to stick to his ideals about the best ideas and minds winning the day, how could he not? Sofia Lamb was even featured on this iconic poster as one of the most valued intellectual members of the city. But at a certain point, she began to erode the edges of Ryan's mission here so severely that he decided something must be done. Andrew began by attempting to engage in a handful of public debates with Dr. Lamb, hoping that by staying true to his intellect and values, he could catch her in a fallacy, pointing out the cracks in his opponent's logic, but it ended up having, well, the nearly opposite effect.
White is not black, Dr. Lamb. Down is not up, and straw is not gold. Look around you. Rapture is no miracle. It is a product of reason. Impossible unless 1 and 1 are 2, and A equates to A.
And yet, alone, each man is a prisoner to bias, dream, delusion, or the pain of a phantom limb. To one man, they are as real as rain. Reality is consensus, and the people are losing faith. Take a walk, Andrew. It is raining in Rapture, and you have simply chosen not to notice.
Sofia Lamb is a character that views individualism and free will as a genuine danger. She believes that the freedom to make choices in life chains people to their own base desires and instincts, with it being impossible to make truly morally good decisions for society at large without a hidden ulterior motive. But man, these debates really emboldened the hell out of Lamb's followers. They started to view her as an actual alternative path for Rapture to take, and even started calling themselves the Rapture family, treating Sofia's writings as something like scripture. And from Ryan's perspective, that was a step too far. It was time to play dirty. And I mean, isn't this backstory just so Bioshock? All these characters being well-crafted caricatures of these beliefs, each one of them just a little too extreme to be a normal, reasonable person. I just love it. But a hugely important thing here with the events of Bioshock 2 is that some point during her rise, Lamb had a child, a daughter named Eleanor, though there is zero hint in-game as to who the father of this child may have been. Some cut content actually suggests it was the protagonist of the game, but well, that was sadly cut. And the moment this character became a mother, we are reminded that she is indeed deeply evil. Because Dr. Lamb saw her innocent baby girl not as something to love and cherish, but something to study and nurture as an experiment. Going so far as to not pay Eleanor any mind during the birth so that she could minimize her, quote, natural biases. Eleanor was born to be a project, and as she grew up was kept completely isolated from other children and lectured constantly on philosophy, psychology, and morality. But soon enough, the pettiness of Andrew Ryan's own evil came knocking at Sofia's door, as he enlisted the help of another one of Rapture's more industrious minds, this man named Augustus Sinclair, to deal with his opponent. And Sinclair is actually another hugely important character in Bioshock 2 himself, a kind of go-get-em businessman type that had several successful businesses down in town, namely Sinclair Solutions, a sort of consulting firm that did all types of shady business provided the price was right. And Sinclair was also the man responsible for the construction of a huge portion of the city called Persephone, located almost underneath Rapture in a massive cave system hovering over an oceanic trench. Persephone is where Sinclair ran his business empire, but also where he constructed a large correctional facility, a prison that you can think of almost as Rapture's Alcatraz, where criminals, the mentally unstable, or just people that Andrew Ryan didn't really like wouldn't just be sent away, they would be forgotten about entirely. So together, Ryan and Sinclair came up with this little plan to send a spy, this man Stanley Poole, a Rapture Tribune reporter, down to Lamb's art colony at Dionysus Park and slowly but surely amass some evidence against the Doctor. And once it was determined that Lamb was using these artists and their work to kind of subliminally speak out against Ryan, he sent his men down there straight away, having Dr. Lamb arrested for conspiracy and Stanley left in charge of the place. But just before she was hauled off, Sofia entrusted the care of her only child to one of her most loyal patients, a woman named Grace Holloway, and then calmly, with a smile, cooperated with the authorities as she was led down into the depths of Persephone. But there is, my friends, another piece to this puzzle that is massively important to understanding not only Lamb's personal philosophies, but her actual plan that we have to put an end to in Bioshock 2. Early on in Rapture's prime, a substance was discovered on the sea floor that came to be known as Adam. It was this naturally occurring goo inside of a specific species of sea slugs that, when refined, enabled scientists to literally rewrite the genetic material inside of living things. So with Adam, humans could alter their bodies with no limits aside from their own imaginations. And given Rapture's ethos about scientific research and commerce without oversight, this led to people gaining essentially superhuman powers through branded products that were called plasmids with zero regard for long-term side effects. I'm talking generating fire with a snap of your fingers, electricity, augmentations that seemed like something straight out of a comic book or a science fiction novel. What on earth could possibly go wrong? But an issue that these Adam researchers faced early on was the amount of the stuff found in a single slug was like pathetically small. However, it was discovered that when the slug was implanted inside of a human being host, the symbiotic relationship between them produced upwards of 30 times the Adam for harvesting. And for whatever reason, it seemed the only stable, suitable host for these slugs were young girls. And thus begins the very dark, strange downfall of Rapture. Soon enough, children were being abducted from all over the city and implanted with these slugs. Phony businesses like Frank Fontaine's Little Sisters orphanages acted as the face of this operation. And as Adam production went into overdrive and the populace began to buy and consume the stuff more and more every day, shocker, it proved to be extremely addictive and destructive on the human body. So before long, larger and larger amounts of the stuff were necessary every day to fuel the city and keep it from descending into tweaker chaos. But of course, it was never enough. The addiction began to turn citizens into something called splicers. Violent, insane, unstable. And this is of course what leads to Bioshock 1, to Frank Fontaine and Andrew Ryan's Civil War that blew the cork off the damn place and turned it into a nightmare. But once the city was in this stage of actively falling apart, the remaining Little Sisters were transitioned from just stationary atom generators into something far darker. Because in their strange dreamlike sea slug state, they were able to literally sniff out the atom that was sitting dormant in corpses all around the city. So they were kind of dispatched with these long needle-like tools to extract the stuff directly from the dead. The atom was being recycled, touching dozens if not hundreds of different people, altering each of their DNA all along the way. And I mean, if there is an image that most people associate with the Bioshock series, it is likely this sort of thing right here. One of those little sisters looking creepy as hell, and her massive protector, a thrall of flesh and metal called the Big Daddy, there to escort these young working children, ensuring that the atom is safely gathered and transported back to the plasmid producers without any violent interference. But all of this is very, very specifically relevant, because just after Dr. Lamb was imprisoned, her daughter, who was left with that woman Holloway, was kidnapped, stolen away by the spy Stanley Poole, and sold for cash into the Little Sister program, where she, just like all the other missing children, was implanted with the slug and put to work as a gatherer. And again, just for clarity's sake, Dr. Lamb was imprisoned sometime before Bioshock 1 and remained completely out of the picture for the entire course of that game. But now, a little pop quiz for you guys. What do you think happened when Andrew Ryan forced the voice of anti-individualism, the voice of collective power and potential, into an inhumane prison full of the other cast-off and insane souls of his utopia? Well, if you guessed that she quickly became the therapist down there, led an uprising, and ultimately came to control the entire prison system, turning it into the base of her operations and her growing cult of personality, you would be correct, my friend. And shortly after taking over Persephone, Lamb covertly retrieved Eleanor from her little sisterhood, purifying her of the slug and turning her back into a normal little girl just as the events of Bioshock 1 begin to take place. And thus, the city is ripped apart by two men trying to win an extremely long-winded game of chess against one another, and Lamb simply waited, completely forgotten by a majority of the remaining citizens, biding her time and preaching to a following so loyal that it could easily be described as a religion. But up to this point, we still haven't really gotten to the good part. The part where we understand what this villain is actually trying to do, trying to achieve, why we have to go play a whole ass video game to stop her. Well, Dr. Lamb had found some serious inspiration during her time of isolation, spending years and years ruminating on the very concept of utopia. Connecting the idea to her experiences as a psychiatrist, her painful time in Japan, her father, and the triage imperative. And Sofia had determined that the only way a perfect society in her eyes could ever exist would be if it were started by someone perfect. Someone utterly disconnected from introspection and the concept of free will, of the self. Essentially, an obedient golem of pure and good ideas, a servant of all instead of itself, someone that was not born and bred, but made to be this way, through what else but the magic of Adam. Because Adam not only rewrote genetic code, it itself had a sort of memory. So if I, Ghostcharm, injected the atom of some dead guy named Bob, it would recall all the past cell configurations of Bob's and give me some of Bob's memories, some of his knowledge. So Lamb's big idea, simply called the New Utopian Project, meant injecting one human test subject with all of the atoms she could possibly find in the hopes that it would place all of the genius, all of the talent, all of the memories of Rapture's deceased elite into a single person. A person that would, according to her calculations, transcend their individuality and exist as a collective mind in one body. In her eyes, the first utopian. And to ensure that she could gather the amount of atom necessary for this, she began at some point sending her agents out of Rapture, up to the surface world, to kidnap young innocent girls and bring them down here to work as a new generation of little sisters, new gatherers to scour the wreckage of the city. Initially, Lamb had a close friend and collaborator, a man named Gil Alexander, volunteer to be her test subject. But unfortunately for him, the absurdly high dose of Adam very quickly corrupted his gene structure and turned him into an insane monster. But in the wake of this failure, Lamb then had her brightest idea yet. Her daughter Eleanor had spent some time as a little sister, so perhaps she had the physical tolerance for Adam that Gil had lacked. She was also young, impressionable, having undergone years of private tutoring on what it means to be human, what it means to be good. Yes, it always had to be Eleanor. And once the events of Bioshock 1 had concluded, leaving both Ryan and Fontaine dead, Sofia Lamb quietly, like a brood mother spider, filled the power vacuum that remained. The ruins of Rapture were hers, with scores of dead, full of Adam waiting in the darkness to be harvested. And it was only a matter of time before our villain finally realized her version of utopia. Well, personally, I have always been very fascinated with how sequels to all-time great games attempt to kind of reshuffle the narrative deck using the very same setting, but concocting a fresh new conflict, a fresh new villain. And though for years and years now, Bioshock 2 has been seen as the obvious black sheep of the franchise, panned by many upon release as a cash grab, it seems to me that time has been very, very kind to this game. People have kind of come along to appreciate it and the unique approach to video game evil that Sofia Lamb represents. But just like its predecessor and successor, Bioshock 2 begins in a bit of an intentional narrative fog, with zero exposition as you hit new game. But here, you play as what I consider to be by far the coolest protagonist in the entire series, Subject Delta, an early Big Daddy prototype, and the opening scene shows us this wonderful montage of Delta and his little sister back before Rapture's fall, just kinda enjoying life, huddling around corpses, climbing in little holes, you know, good memories. Until suddenly, something is wrong. The little sister is being taken from you.
There we are. He's perfectly safe now. This is not your daughter. Do you understand? Her name is Eleanor, and she is mine. Now, kneel, please. Remove your helmet. Now, take the pistol. Place it against your head. Fire.
Now that is quite an opening. No mistaking who the villain's gonna be here, and there is something about that specific imperious as hell British accent, it just sounds so evil. And man, there are really fewer things in all of video game history cooler to me than a Big Daddy. Basically, genetically enhanced humans that have had their flesh and organs grafted into a massive diving suit, most oftentimes against their will. Ex-criminals, the medically insane or political opponents of Ryan's that he and his cronies forced into this role. In fact, once upon a time, Sofia Lamb herself assisted in selecting Big Daddy candidates from the Persephone prison. But initially, these guys simply served as Rapture's maintenance workers, drilling, hammering, riveting, fixing, and building up the city into what it would become. But once Adam took over the way it did, they were of course repurposed. Genetically altered further to be simple-minded, their free will shackled by the pair bond as they pledged their life and limb to the protection of their assigned little sister. And Subject Delta here specifically has some fantastic background lore himself. Honestly, he's one of the coolest silent protagonists in any game I have ever played, period. I wouldn't mind making a Heropedia video on him, but let me know if that's something you would actually watch. But anyway, damn. Delta was the protector of Eleanor Lamb. That is pretty crazy. And of course, this moment is not the end for our hero, as 10 long years later, Delta miraculously comes to, inexplicably alive again in the bowels of Rapture, alone and untethered. And looking around here, I mean, wow. This really is probably the best video game setting ever created, and I love how this sequel explores completely new and strange areas of the city. It feels so distinct and different, but still so Rapture. Just fantastic. And when you really begin to wander around the first level here, the Adonis Luxury Resort, you see that things have indeed changed. There is graffiti everywhere celebrating this lamb. And the enemies you're facing, these splicers, those are members of her Rapture family, fanatically devoted to their matriarch and hunting you down from your very first steps. And I also love how with that opening cutscene, the implied mission here is super duper clear. You gotta go find your little sister. It's all you need to know. But this task is clarified further when Delta comes across a gift that's been left for him by Eleanor. And it seems that all these years later, she desperately wants you to come find her. And poor Delta, man, he has no idea he is embarking on a super dark quest of discovery and pain. But yet another thing that I just love about Bioshock 2, aside from the utterly perfect drill arm, is that the game actually has several possible outcomes, possible endings, which all depend entirely on how the player chooses to navigate the moral conundrums of Rapture. And for the remainder of this video, just know you are watching me achieve the pure good ending. But interestingly, as you begin to cause some trouble and power on systems and stuff to try to escape the Adonis, Delta is contacted over his radio by yet another important character in the lore of Bioshock, Brigid Tenenbaum, one of the other brightest minds of Rapture that was actually the original discoverer of Adam. And get this, guys, Tenenbaum actually made it out alive after the end of Bioshock 1 against all odds, returning safely to the surface world. But once she heard that Lamb was alive down here and actively abducting children for her Utopia project, Brigid willingly came back to put a stop to it and try to rescue all these poor children. So she needs your help as a big daddy if we're gonna revert them all back to their normal human forms. But of course, it does not take long to realize that Sofia Lamb, she's been watching you like a hawk from the jump. And as you try to make your way to Tenenbaum, she officially introduces herself.
I know you. That symbol on your hand marks you a dead man. 10 years, Subject Delta, since I watched you put a gun to your head and pull the trigger. But take heart. Out of your pain, paradise was born. I don't know how you survived, but your suffering is over now. These men will ease your burden. Please understand that like all I have done, this is an act of love.
Ah yes, just like Andrew Ryan and Comstock from the other Bioshock games, the one-way FaceTime call to make you feel insignificant and powerless. Classic. And with Lamb's demeanor, she makes you feel like what you truly are, a test subject, a variable in her equation, but still with that cold sense of weaponized compassion. And this to me is the greatest aspect of Sofia as a villain, her sense of complete control, foresight, and confidence. Her power lying in the messaging that she has flooded her followers with over years, and from the comfort of her office, she need only point a finger in your direction and the goons descend upon you like a swarm of rats. And as you continue on, making progress, gaining new powers and abilities, Lamb only feels more confident, radioing in routinely just to talk some smack.
I do not hate you, Delta. Indeed, I care for you in equal measure to any other sentient creature. But I cannot sacrifice 1,000 of my children for one rebellious son.
And that overwhelming presence that Lamb has across this entire experience is only compounded further by her audio logs lying around the levels that offer more insight into her evil, formatted almost like recording lessons for Eleanor all about the world.
To my daughter, Eleanor, soon you will be born, and Rapture will be your home. You shall be raised as I was, to advance the common good through social psychiatry. This city's potential is immeasurable, Eleanor, yet our beliefs are unwelcome here. Life will be difficult, but the price of revolution is always dear. If we are patient with her, Rapture will come to us.
But really the core structure of Bioshock 2 comes together when Tenenbaum hands you over to none other than Augustus Sinclair, the very same Sinclair that once had Lamb imprisoned. And you two fellas forge an extremely unlikely but lovable alliance, together pushing this old busted up ass train across the city in a linear fashion so that you can find Eleanor and Augustus can just make it out of this mess alive. But really, Sinclair is just the best. He's such a smarmy, slimy guy, and when you find some of his old audio tapes, you see that he was like a Rapture man through and through, willing to stab people in the back, lie, cheat, and steal to get ahead, but here in this post-Rapture context, he's really not so bad.
Now, in order to melt that ice, you'll need a plasmid like a handful of hellfire. We used to sell a fine old product called Incinerate in the amusement park up yonder. Go on and find a way in. I've already been on all the rides.
He guides you every single step of the way over the radio, becoming a genuine friend in the end, and that is a rare, rare thing to find down here. But I mentioned the moral conundrums of Bioshock 2, and in your quest as Delta, there are really two key things that must be decided. First is the fate of the Little Sisters, which you find around each area and then adopt after eliminating their existing Big Daddy. You of course utilize them to harvest Adam for both narrative and gameplay purposes, as this ends up being like the main currency you're spending to improve Delta's abilities and get new ones. But once they're done gathering for you, you have to make the call on harvesting them fully, killing them for a tremendous amount of extra Adam, or purifying them for less and saving the children's lives. Then the second thing you must decide is the fate of 4 important side characters that have close, intimate ties to Sofia Lamb, with each one of them in some way impeding your progress and taking up the mantle of temporary antagonist in a specific area. The first of these 4 is Grace Holloway, who you encounter in Popper's Drop, the old jazz singer who was once entrusted with Eleanor, and through her, you learn a lot more about the Rapture family, how it's structured, how Dr. Lamb swayed so many of the disenfranchised through her therapy back in the day. And Grace is really interesting because on paper, she should absolutely be one of the good guys. She cares deeply for the health of the Little Sisters and used music in her day to fight against Andrew Ryan's evil. But this is also one of Lamb's top lieutenants. Does she live or die? Then the second one you encounter is a fascinating man named Father Wales in the level called Siren's Alley, formerly known as Simon Wales. He and his brother are actually the architects who designed and built most of Rapture, but after the city experienced leaking and pressure issues early on, they were both disgraced and cast into oblivion by Ryan, slowly falling into depression and plasmid abuse. But this guy right here is the main reason that the Rapture family ended up taking on its kind of religious tone. Lamb's philosophies of collectivism had a crazy effect on him, and he transformed into a preacher of her word. But unfortunately for Father Wales, there is no way to save him. He has turned into a splicer himself and attacks you regardless of your choices. Then in the level of Dionysus Park, there is none other than Stanley Poole, Sinclair's spy that once got Lamb arrested. And honestly, this guy is possibly the most evil character in the entire game. This little rat is responsible for, yes, Eleanor being sold into the Little Sister program, but additionally, after Lamb was arrested and Poole took over Dionysus Park, he was exceedingly hedonistic with the place, spending all of Lamb's money and throwing crazy parties and stuff. But when he heard that Lamb had liberated herself, fearing her wrath, he sabotaged the entire place, flooding it intentionally and killing hundreds if not thousands of people. And that's not even to mention Stanley is responsible for your player character's tragic fate being transformed into Subject Delta, but that is a story for another time. And after begrudgingly working with him to keep the train moving along toward Lamb, it's again up to you if this man lives or dies. And finally, the greatest of Lamb's 4 minions by far, and for me, probably the most single compelling character in the entire game, Gil Alexander, the failed utopian. And when you first arrive at Fontaine Futuristics, you are greeted by this strange little security bot, barking nonsense at you, and this is indeed Mr. Alexander. But then you come across these pre-recorded messages that Gil left behind while he was still sane. Basically him guiding and begging someone who has come along to just put him out of his misery. He describes his regret in working in Rapture, and he illuminates the horrors that he underwent in this experiment. Once you find him in his big tank, he really is a monster, and maybe it would be merciful to kill him. But again, the choice is in your hands. And man, I adore when video games allow the villain's evil to speak and radiate through others. It just gives the world that much more believable depth and that much more texture. Now, even though I am a staunch enjoyer of Bioshock 2, I will be the first to admit that Sofia Lamb is probably the hardest villain in this series to really, fully understand. I mean, as the player, it never, at any point, feels like the reason we are on this quest is because Lamb is peddling a specifically dangerous rhetoric that has far-reaching consequences. I mean, collectivism could be bad, sure. Turning her daughter into a genetic conglomeration of everyone who once lived here, I guess that could be bad too, but Rapture is already so far beyond saving and messed up 10 times over. Personally, I don't really believe her experiments could ever pose a serious threat to the world at large. And this is really where I just think the main disconnect in Lamb's presentation is found. You know, they say comparison is the thief of joy, and this is just a fundamentally different kind of villain from Andrew Ryan, Frank Fontaine, or even Father Comstock. Because while at times she kind of represents a bigger commentary on the greater good and stuff, I guess, to me, Bioshock 2 is much more about the smaller scale narrative idea of the intimate familial connections, unnatural as they may be, between Delta, Eleanor, and Dr. Lamb. And I think when you shrink it down and look at this villain through that lens, she is actually pretty damn great. But it's really important to underline that because of the genetically designed pair bond here, Eleanor genuinely considers Delta to be her father, her protector. She loves you and Delta loves her, as far as he can feel that emotion. And it is Lamb and Lamb alone who interferes. So when you finally arrive at Persephone with all the help you've had from Sinclair, Sophia is not happy.
I wonder, Delta, do you know why you are here? Have you any idea what my daughter has given you? As I watch you now, I envy your ignorance. You still believe.
And with this being the long-term lair of our villain, the thematic stuff gets cranked up to 11. The whole metamorphosis, the butterflies, this idea of Eleanor being the savior of rapture. And then you see where she has been caged all this time. Massive vats of Adam line the room. The candles make it almost feel sacred. And then we get to see just how evil Sofia Lamb really is.
Look at her, Delta. 10 years, and still she dreams of you.
50 seconds remaining.
Do you know why Eleanor brought you here? She wanted a father. So she found a way to restore you in body and mind. And she has been watching you ever since, exalting your every act as gospel. The girl lying on that bed is no longer my child, nor my life's work. She is a monster, shaped by you alone, just as she has always wanted.
20 seconds remaining.
But there is one detail of your mutual bond she failed to account for. Your body was designed to lapse into a coma when her heart ceases to beat. Eleanor, forgive me. His body is shutting down now, naturally. But if he dies of trauma, he will return elsewhere. Full restraints at all times. No one enters this room until he expires.
Jesus, lady. But thankfully, this is only the beginning of the end.
Father, it's me, Eleanor. I'm so sorry. Mother stopped my heart long enough to sever our bond. Staying near me won't stop you from dying now. Or worse. But I can still help you escape. This little sister's brought you something that will allow you to take control of her.
And this is crazy. Playing as a little sister briefly, you get to see through their eyes not the war-torn, nasty-ass, dangerous Rapture, but this soft, cloth-covered baby version of the place. It's no wonder they can retain their childlike innocence. And as this little sister, you gotta go gather some Adam, of course, as well as some pieces of equipment so that Eleanor can transform herself into something called a big sister in order to help you escape. And basically, big sisters are just former little sisters that have aged, grown incredibly powerful with all the Adam they've spent their life around. And now that Eleanor's free, she wants to fight beside her father to the bitter end. And from Lamb's perspective, this moment must just suck beyond words. To be so close to the finish line of your lifelong vision, just for Delta, this big lumbering dumbass, this afterthought you believe to have been dealt with years ago, come crashing into the shit like a bull in a china shop. All game long, this has been a cool, calm, collected antagonist that seemed to be so many steps ahead of you, but now she starts to sound defeated.
Subject Delta, I know you can hear me. You have stolen my life's work, and with it, my only daughter. But Rapture is the house of monsters. The surface will not have us. And now, we shall be buried as a family, side by side.
So Lamb intends to blow the entire place up, dragging it down into the darkness, the epitome of her extreme collectivist worldview, where we go one, we go all. But honestly, the final stretch of gameplay here has always been very odd to me, as you don't encounter Lamb face to face ever again, period. No final epic conversation or monologue. No big FU moment, just a race against the clock. You and Eleanor trying desperately to find your man Sinclair so you can use his personal escape sub that's docked nearby. But as you scour the inner chambers of Persephone, you discover Lamb's final stroke of evil.
Don't you recognize Sinclair, Delta? Now he is what you should have been. One final Alpha series, ready to die for the family. As Persephone's former owner, he is the ideal man to put you back in your cage.
Kid, I'm sorry. I've locked you in here. Lamb's making me dance on her goddamn strings. I can't stop. You're gonna have to break in here and put me down. Wish there was another way, but I'd rather die a man than live like this.
A kind of extreme railroad problem set up by the lovely therapist here to force you into murdering your closest ally if you want to get out alive. And though it hurts, there's no saving Sinclair now. And with his keys in your possession, you need only fight through the last of the Rapture family. Until finally, just when father and daughter are on the brink of escape, the place goes up in a flash. And it is here where your actions as Delta, the way you treated the little sisters, the way you treated those 4 survivors, not only shapes the ending, but determines the fate of Sofia Lamb.
And then, Father, the Rapture dream was over. You taught me that evil is just a word. Under the skin, it's simple pain. For you, mercy was victory. You sacrificed, you endured, and when given the chance, you forgave. Always. Mother believed this world was irredeemable, but she was wrong, Father. We are Utopia, you and I, and in forgiving, we left the door open for her. The Rapture dream is over, but in waking, I am reborn. This world is not ready for me, yet here I am. It would be so easy to misjudge them. You are my conscience, Father, and I need you to guide me. You will always be with me now, Father. Your memories, your drives. And when I need you, you'll be there on my shoulder, whispering.
And remember that this is the good ending, the hopeful ending, where Lamb is spared and Eleanor marches forward into an unknown but optimistic future. There are several others that are, well, not as nice, where Eleanor is instead inspired by Delta's malice and selfishness, allowing her mother to die a slow and painful death. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's review a bit. So overall, I would say that I personally do enjoy Lamb as far as her backstory, her dialogue, and especially her voice acting performance from actress Fenella Woolger. However, I find it pretty damn disappointing that toward the end of this incredible game, she fades so much into the background, just kind of sending you snippy voice notes and meeting her end or not unceremoniously in a cutscene. I mean, if she does live, what comes right after that? Is she just like coughing up water on the rocks right off screen here? Then there is also the interesting but kind of hard to escape fact that this villain was, in a way, never really meant to exist.
What?
In the original Bioshock, there was zero mention of Sofia Lamb whatsoever, which is kind of crazy in the lore given her massive impact on Andrew Ryan in the city of Rapture. But this is of course because Lamb didn't exist until Bioshock 2 was already in the works, being written and designed by a completely different development team that didn't include series creator Ken Levine. And her utter absence from the first game is kind of justified by saying Ryan would have buried all memory of her, which, I mean, I get, but it's kind of hard for me to this day to kind of fully connect the real-world development lore with that in-universe stuff, though of course this is not the character's fault. Then we have Lamb's own philosophies and goals, which by the end of the game I actually think are pretty interesting, and in a good, flawed villain way, extremely hypocritical. Because while she preaches this whole death of the self thing, she herself benefits personally from the power structures that she has carefully built on widespread manipulation of vulnerable people, a fanatical cult of personality worshipping her words, and her alone being the lead architect of this so-called utopian future. I mean, she literally locks herself away for a decade in a secure, well-stocked suite where she conducts her research while all of her followers live in squalor and danger across the ruins of Rapture. To me, that's hardly a collective. Also, I think it's pretty funny that she envisions her daughter absorbing all the memories of Rapture's minds, resulting in her becoming selfless of all things. I mean, I guess she could be this monolith of knowledge, but couldn't she also potentially just be the single most individualistic, insufferable person of all time? I feel like the further you go in trying to understand this woman and what she's trying to do, the less it makes sense. I mean, she's crazy. But all of this is why I ultimately find Lamb to be so memorable and so underrated. Because unlike villains driven by hatred, her crimes genuinely emerge from a place of compassion. And from the beginning of her backstory, all the way through the end credits of Bioshock 2, she never stops believing that she is absolutely saving the world. And when someone this intelligent, this persuasive, this capable is convinced that their vision of paradise is infallible, Dr. Sofia Lamb shows us that there is simply no limit to the suffering they can justify when it comes to its pursuit.